In today's society, many employers are recognising the importance of the work-life balance, especially in the time where working from home is more commonplace. Many people are drawn to just putting in that extra hour, and this extra work can sometimes end up being detrimental to both the worker's mental health and the work in the way of errors. When I'm working in my normal day job, I do work from home, and I'm very lucky that my employers encourage both me and my work colleagues to have a barrier between work and personal life, and I am very grateful for this. On the railway, it's also important to ensure that you are fit to work and well rested. Most railways will ask you to sign on with a declaration that you're not under any influence and that you are competent both physically and mentally that you can do the work. A reminder of the reasons why this is so important can be found in the warehouse in the National Railway Museum, and it's a simple brass shoehorn. The brass from this shoehorn came from one of the larger disasters this side of the North, and the disaster was simply tragic from start to finish. James Holmes was considered one of the more competent signalmen on the North Eastern Railway. He worked the Thirsk and Northallerton line. He was posted at the Manor House cabin, which sat 4 miles from Northallerton, and had a relatively blemish-free career. He was 27 and had a young family, including an infant daughter called Rosa. He had been in the service since he was 16 and trained from the start to be a signaller. After having Halloween off and spending the day in the orchard, James had prepped and prepared for his night shift from 6 p.m. that night to 6 a.m. on the 1st of November. He chose not to sleep that day, knowing that he would sleep after his shift ended, ready for his second night shift the following evening. It's a common practice for those going from day shifts to nights, although it is encouraged to try and nap a few hours before the night shift starts. After an uneventful night shift, James walked for about 1.5 hours to his home. He noted that the fires were unlit, so after lighting the fires, he prepared to retire when his wife spoke to him about his youngest being unwell and breathing heavy. Putting the child's illness down to a common cold, he instructed her to take his eldest to school and to tend to the other children, and he would put the youngster in his bed to keep an eye on her. But by lunchtime, Rosa had not gotten better, and she'd started to fit. In desperation, James went to fetch the doctor, but the walk was over an hour, and by the time he got back, Rosa had sadly passed away. Knowing he had duty at 6 p.m, he called for his mother-in-law to look after his distraught family while he walked to the station to see if he could have his shift relieved. He was racked with grief, and he had not slept for over 36 hours. When he arrived at the station, he asked for the station master to contact the signal inspector to ask for relief and to notify him when his mother-in-law would arrive, explaining the situation. But the station master came back with news. There was no relief tonight, and despite everything, James was forced to work. He wandered from the signal box to the station and back twice in anticipation for his mother-in-law's arrival. But it was noted he was back in the box and working by 8 p.m. He was notified she had arrived by 9 and had headed straight to the house. At 10:30 in Edinburgh, the Scotch Express was preparing to leave. It was an overnight train to London and was a mixed traffic consist comprising of Pullman cars for the first class, dining cars, some sleeping cars, a horse box and a Caledonian wagon. It was a long train, about 13 coaches, so it was decided to separate the train into 2. It wasn't uncommon to do this, if it was busy or the train unduly long. The first train departed right on time, but the second left Edinburgh about 40 minutes late due to late connecting trains. It wasn't the greatest of nights, as there was thick fog and clawing back time was going to be problematic. At 2 a.m, just as the second Scotch Express was steaming to Newcastle, another train set up from Middlesbrough. This train was a 34-wagon slow goods train, and its destination was the town of Starbeck, just outside of Harrogate. It was fully laden with a variety of goods for the town and surrounding area. The first portion of the Scotch Express arrived at James's signal box and passed without incident, although it was late due to the weather. James noted the train passing and was alert. At 3:24 a.m, James was given the ready signal for the goods train. James accepted it, but after 46 hours awake, his body could endure no more and he collapsed. The goods train, having been cleared by the signal box before, entered James's section. They noted the home signal at danger and stopped by it. After a few minutes of waiting, the driver sounded his whistle, and after a few more minutes, he alighted his engine to walk to the signal box to see what the trouble was. At 4 a.m. on the dot, James suddenly woke up dazed and confused to the sound of a bell warning him that the second half of the Scotch Express was on the way. Seeing his instrument saying "line blocked," he assumed it was all set for this first Scotch Express and that he hadn't cleared them yet. So he did, and accepted the train into his section. The Scotch Express was running at 60 miles an hour. James realised much too late what he'd done, and it was too late to stop the crash. The express smashed at almost full speed into the goods train. The sudden forces forced the heavy Pullman coach, which was sitting behind the light composite passengers coaches, to smash it through them like paper. The guard of the goods train and 9 passengers were killed in the crash, and 39 were wounded. The express train's hot coals set fire to the wreckage, and the gas lighting in the coaches would only add fuel. The fire was so hot that coins in the pockets of the dead were found melted and fused to their charred remains. The inquiry was swift and brutal. No one was in doubt as to who caused the crash, and James was promptly charged with manslaughter. However, considering the circumstances, the jury chose to discharge him. The circumstances surround his frame of mind and physical health were simply tragic, and many were sympathetic to his plight. The railway company, however, was given much harsher treatment. The investigation and the public strongly criticised the treatment of James prior to the accident. Despite James declaring himself unfit, the inspectors required him to work, and even the other signal boxes who knew of James's condition did nothing to contact him, despite bell silence for nearly quarter of an hour. Finally, blame was placed on the crew of the goods train, who had failed to obey Rule 55 of the Railway Handbook, stating that crews must alert a signalman if being held at a signal for longer than 3 minutes. The driver tried to excuse himself by saying it was only a few minutes. However, the timings of the other trains proved him incorrect. Finally, the marshals that comprised the Scotch Express were also found to be caused to blame. By putting the heavier Pullman coach in the centre of the train and putting the lighter composites sandwiched between it and the engine, it caused a lot more death and trauma. It was recommended that the North Eastern review its marshalling processes and assembly of trains in the future. The inquiry called for a new type of technology in order to stop the accident from happening again. The technology was around but had not been fully adopted, and its technologies railways use today. Track circuits are electric devices that are placed at the side of the rails and emit a low electrical charge. These are usually placed at the beginning of a block section of track, and the track is insulated between it and the next block, with a copper wire running underneath the tracks completing the circuit. When there is no train, the circuit is complete and can run uninterrupted. This allows the signal to display an all clear, but when a train enters its block, because its wheels and axles are metal, it creates a short circuit. When this happened, the circuit is interrupted and the signal switches to red until the train is clear, and then it switches back to green again. Of course, there's a lot more to it, but it's no doubt that if the line was fitted with track circuits, then the accident may never have happened. The shoehorn that sits in the warehouse is made from brass from the accident. It is inscribed with the date of the disaster and the number 178ENG, presumably the engine number where the brass was taken from. It's not known who made it or how it came to be in the hands of the museum. It was most likely made by a worker or the station master, and it was likely donated to the collection when the station closed, or donated to the LNER collection in the 1930s. I would love to say that following on from this, the North Eastern Railway learnt its lesson with its workers, and other corporations took the lessons from Thirsk to heart. But even today, accidents caused by either overwork or stress are at an all-time high. It's easy to think, work first and yourself second. But if James had just insisted he was unfit, if the station master had insisted the signal box be switched out for just one night, and if other signallers were looking out for each other in times of trouble, then all of this may have just been prevented.